Hi everyone, I'm Danielle Byington, and in this video, we're going to talk about Aphra Behn's poem, The Disappointment. The title indicates what the nature of this is about, but just to kind of clue you into exactly who and what she's talking about, because it isn't just simple, not a simple sort of fictional narrative going on here. She is replying to John Wilmot, the second Earl of Rochester's poem, The Imperfect Enjoyment. You can see my video for that in my channel. And she is pointing out, or basically, this is a commentary on how in his poem he blames everyone but himself for his premature ejaculation, because that's what his profane poem is entirely about. He blames his lover Karina, and then he spends the other half of the poem yelling at his penis. So if you haven't already figured out by now, this poem is it has a lot of sexually explicit content, excuse me, maybe not as much so as The Imperfect Enjoyment, but this does talk about ED just as much as the Earl of Rochester's poem. So I do have some bullet points there that give you like a few highlights, but in this video, I'm going through each stanza to kind of summarize the content as it's happening. Okay, in stanza one, we have one day the amorous Lysander by an impatient passion swayed, surprised fair Chloris, that loved maid, who couldn't defend herself no longer. Then we have the sun is setting. All things did with his love conspire. The gilded planet of the day, that's talking about the sun in the sky, in his gay chariot drawn by fire, was now descending to the sea. So the sun is setting, like we see it, like it'd be like if you're looking over an ocean and that horizon. So it's sunset, and Lysander, it seems that Lysander and Chloris know each other because it says, and because he's kind of impatient. We find out what he's impatient about as the poem goes on. Impatient to do something with Chloris, so it seems they know each other, and he has surprised her. So they have this encounter at sunset in a lone thicket made for love, silent as yielding maids consent. She with a charming languishment permits his force, yet gently strove. Her hands his bosom softly meet, but not to put him back designed, rather to draw him on an inclined, whilst he lay trembling at her feet. So for the next few stanzas, there is some back and forth about like if she wants to or not. This isn't don't take this to the extreme of it being directly about sexual assault. She does go on to say in another stanza or so, like, I'm not sure if I want to do this. Cease, cease. I want to give my maidenhood to you, but I'm just not sure. And yes, he should stop, but he doesn't. But she doesn't want him to stop. She does go on to want to do the deed with him. So there is a bit of discussion you can have about consent, well, a lot really, because even in these the third and fourth line here in stanza two, when it says like they're alone in a thicket, and that's what that scene is made for. It says it's made for love, silent as yielding maids consent. So if the maid is yielding, if she is giving consent, it's saying that that consent is silent. So this is where it gets kind of hard to read, like how much consent is there, how much did Chloris want to do it. When we get to by stanza 7 and after that, it seems like she was indeed like down for this. She maybe had apprehensions, but this is not like a hard line of this was assault. Okay, so let me also clarify. I hate saying this kind of phrase all the time, but I teach stuff that's really old. So I do have to remind students often that they didn't have dialogue for this kind of stuff then, of like saying like no means no. So someone could be accused of sexual assault, but it'd probably only be on the grounds of like if someone found out their daughter had been ruined, because that's gonna affect the dowry or like anyone wanting to marry her at all. And so, since women were property basically just for business transactions, then it might be treated in a legal way. But I think the way you might immediately want to start looking at this in the lens of the 21st century, or especially like 2024 at the time I'm recording this, um, that is not exactly the direction that Aphra Behn is going. So moving on, we have the back and forth of consent. Maybe Chloris wants to do a few things, but not go all the way. It's saying that her beauty, her bright eyes, inspires him to carry on. And then we see that she does say, she cried here in the middle, cease, cease your vain desire, or I'll call out. What would you do? My dearer honor, even to you, I cannot, must not give. Retire or take that life whose chiefest part I gave you in conquest, my heart. So she is saying, like, go ahead, cease, cease. I can't give my honor, my virginity, my maidenhood, even to you, Lysander. She's like, I really want to, but um, I gotta keep my honor, and you should want me to keep my honor, because it sounds like maybe they kind of have a situationship of some sort. Um, now this is the part where maybe that whole bit about consent gets confusing, like I was saying back in stanza 2, because with each touch, she is changing her mind in the moment, and she's like, oh, never mind, I do want to. But he as much unused to fear as he was capable of love. The blessed minutes to improve kisses her lips, her neck, her hair, each touch, her new desires, alarms, his burning, trembling hand he pressed upon her melting, snowy breast while she lay panting in his arms. And then it's like, well, it goes on to say in those last few lines, she has all these unguarded beauties, spoils, and trophies of the enemy. It's like she is the forbidden treasure to him. And so like in that middle stanza, what I have pointed out in the end here, each touch renews her desires to go ahead and go further. And now, without respect or fear, and it tells you that in that past stanza too, Lysander is not okay, but he has much unused to fear. So he's not used to being afraid. He's not used to being told no. Same thing in the beginning of stanza 5 here. And now, without respect or fear, he's just going to do what he wants. He's not afraid. He seeks the objects of his vows, um, as in, like, probably what he told himself his goal was in going to this thicket where he surprised her. So even though she is not sure, he decides to pursue it anyways, because she seems to be like, okay, I think I do want to, the more he kisses her. And then by the last half of this stanza, all the lines are basically about her vagina. By swift degrees advancing, where his daring hand that altar seized. So basically, he grabbed her by the where gods of love do sacrifice, that awful throne, that paradise, where rage is tamed and anger pleased, and it even calls it a fountain. So, lots of metaphors there. And stanza 6, so we're almost to the good part coming up in stanza 7. So in 6, I'll move this window a little bit. They're about to do this on, they're about to do their thing on a bed of moss, like at this romantic pastoral setting. Um, but even though she is apparently willing, it seems there might still be apprehension. She's just like maybe really nervous. It's hard to necessarily interpret it at this point. Her balmy lips encountering his, their bodies as their souls are joined. So they're like embracing, and they extend themselves upon the moss. So Chloris is half dead and breathless lay, just like the nervousness of the moment. This expression, I'm going back up a few lines where it says, where both in transports were confined. To be transported. It's going to say that again about Lysander in just a moment. Um, you're just like to be carried away. It's almost to be like hypnotized by the moment of what's happening. So moving on, this is where the point of the poem happens. We have a plot twist. So Chloris is like, okay, seems to be down. She's offering her virgin innocence, but Lysander can't get it up. He saw how at her length she lay. He saw her rising bosom bare, her loose thin robes through which appear a shape designed for love and play. So basically, when it talks about this thin robe and her beautiful body underneath it, it kind of reminds me of like some kind of Grecian marble statue of Venus or something. So, a shape designed for love and play, abandoned by her pride and shame. She does her softest sweets dispense, offering her virgin innocence. So this is where like we kind of see a little more clearly, okay, pretty sure she did want to do it. A victim to love's sacred flame, whilst the other, sorry, I'm moving the window, whilst the other ravished shepherd lies unable to perform the sacrifice. O Lysander. Stanza 8, ready to taste 1,000 joys. This is one of those phrases I pointed out in the first PowerPoint, where I say this is some of the language you see kind of being borrowed from Rochester's poem. So, ready to taste 1,000 joys. Oh, and that word about balmy too. Back, I think it's talking about her balmy lips. Stanza or two back. Thee too, transported hapless swain, found the vast pleasure turn into pain. Like he wants to, and he really, really wants to, but he can't. And what's worse than really wanting to and not being able to is the embarrassment he is facing. So we have an explanation that he is too transported. I told you that word was going to come back up. He's too transported to get an erection, basically. So it's kind of like he was thinking about it too much. And the next stanza is further explaining this, that nature's support, without whose aid she can no human being give itself, now wants the art to live, faintness its slackened nerves invade. So nature's support gave him the stimulation. So I add here that that's Chloris's body. You could also argue that's kind of the aid, but it's also like his idea of like showing up here and surprising her as well. So like nature gives the urge, but itself now wants the art to live the faintness, like the body, the biology, the slackened nerves invade, like it can't keep up with what nature has supported. I want to point out something here too about spelling. She can no human being give. And you probably noticed some other words I've gone through were like maybe not what you were expecting if I read them aloud differently. So remember, if this is the long 18th century, something I mentioned in that 18th century history video is that modern English as we know it, like that really emerges and begins to solidify, let's say, like the 16th century and going, excuse me, yes, 16th century going into the 17th century. Once we get into the long 18th century, remember that that begins 1660, not necessarily a hard 1700. Um, Even though modern English is solidifying, the spelling is not always exactly the same across the board. You have a lot of these, you have the apostrophe D as opposed to saying ed for past tense. Um, that's, I think you probably think of something like Shakespeare's writing when you see all those apostrophe D's, and that's also indicating like an extra syllable instead of just adding the ed and it stays the same. So remember, this is like later on in the 18th century, we get the first dictionary, and that kind of helps solidify spelling. Okay, stanza 10, we have 4 stanzas left, and your summary here is that he's got to come to terms that there's just no hope of getting it on with Chloris. In this so amorous, cruel strife where love and fate were too severe, the poor Lysander, in despair, renounced his reason with his life. Now all the brisk and active fire that should the nobler part inflame, ha ha, unactive, frigid, dull became, and left no spark for new desire. It's a sad day for Lysander. Chloris returning from the trance. Remember, she was transported too. That first time I mentioned that word, like transported. So she's like kind of like, wait, okay, what's going on? What's taking so long? And she reaches her hand down, and it tells you in those last few lines that the verdant leaf beneath the verdant leaves a snake. So she finds out pretty quickly why, and her reaction is to run away because, I said he's probably embarrassed, and that's as painful as like his pain if he has the urge and he can't do his thing. And so she's embarrassed for him. Have you ever felt embarrassed for someone? Like it does suck. You want to like get away from the situation. It's almost worse than feeling embarrassed for yourself because at least you can talk yourself out of that or talk yourself down from it or whatever later on. If you feel embarrassed for someone in the moment, it is terribly awkward. But she's also kind of angry because she but had finally, after like, I'm not sure, okay, okay, like I'm offering my virgin innocence. Remember that phrase? So she was gonna do the deed and then he can't even go through with it. Like lightning through the grove. She's running. It also says she's like Daphne running from Apollo there in the line, or Daphne from the Delphic god. If you know that myth, if you don't, you can look that up. No print upon the grassy road she leaves to instruct pursuing eyes. This girl is running from this guy so fast that she's not even leaving footprints on the ground. Run, Chloris, run. And then here in the end, he's going to blame everything for his impotence, other than himself. He blames her, he blames her body, just like Rochester did in The Imperfect Enjoyment. The nymphs' resentments none but I can well imagine and condole, but none can guess Lysander's soul, but those who swayed his destiny. His silent griefs swell up in storms. So this guy is like boohooing in the thicket because he couldn't get it up, and not one god his fury spares. He cursed his birth, his fate, his stars. He curses his birth, his fate, his stars. Um, but even more, the shepherdess's charms, like it's all her fault. See, just like Rochester. Um, so he didn't directly blame his penis like Rochester did, but still blaming everybody else. It all had damned him to the hell of impotence. Okay, that is all for Aphra Behn's The Disappointment. Thank you for watching.